Yesterday I spoke about verse 2, and then I made the comment that, one of my old Dharma friends said that much of Dharma practice is character development. So after after lunch, then Venerable Sepal asked me, well, why then are we studying debate? Because when you look, at least superficially, how does learning that, X is a P because of give a valid reason, and it's not a Q because, how does learning all of that help you with character development? So I think this is quite important to understand, why we're learning it. So one thing from my experience is studying the debate techniques and how you have to say something, how definitions are made, how questions are asked. It forces you to think clearly, okay? And that ability to think clearly is very helpful whenever you hear any Dharma teaching, because then you can take that Dharma teaching and follow the logical explanation that's given in it. And if there's something that isn't logical, you can detect that and then question it and try and figure it out for yourself. So it really teaches you how to think in a clear way, okay? We also discovered when we were learning how to make the syllogisms and then looking at our emotional syllogisms, which of course is not taught in the basic debate text. But when we did that, did you find that helpful for looking at your mind and understanding how your mind works? Yeah, you bet. We really begin to see how totally illogical and unreasonable our afflicted way of thinking is. And then, when afflictions come up after that, then if we look at the quote, syllogisms we're making, then we can see that the basis for the affliction is completely distorted. And that helps us, drop the affliction and remedy the affliction, okay? Another thing that debating, or this whole thing of debate and philosophy does, is it helps you learn how to ask questions in a clear manner. Now, you may have noticed when, courses, that some people ask questions and it takes them 2 or 3 or even 5 minutes to ask the question. Because they'll go, well, you said, and blah, 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 and then there's this extremely subtle, and then there's, the path of this, and then there's my anger, and then this and that, and how does all this fit together, And the question is just completely all over the board, and, sometimes I know I've had to stop people and say, please, can you synthesize your question? And some people have real difficulty doing that. What really am I seeking to understand? They aren't clear. And if we aren't clear on what we're seeking to understand, then we're not going to get the answer by asking a question, because our question isn't going to be clear. So this whole way of thinking that we're taught really helps us to ask clean, clear, to the point questions, okay? So this concerns not only when we're studying philosophy, but in all the other aspects of our life too, because if we learn to think clearly and to ask questions clearly, then even we're in a meeting trying to decide, how the Abbey is going to expand over the next 20 years, we'll at least be able to express our ideas in clean, clear ways, that other people can understand and ask questions that really apply to the topic. So very, very helpful, I think, in our communication abilities. of course, there are some things to be avoided. I talked to one of my friends who studied at IBD for many, many years, and he told me, he was a layperson, and he told me that after a while, when he talked with his girlfriend, whatever he said, he would reply in debate language. And that just didn't go over very well for creating understanding and empathy, and she didn't feel heard very much. So he said, there's a tendency sometimes to go to the extreme, so you have to know when this way of thinking and speaking is appropriate and when it isn't. Yeah. I've also seen sometimes that people's ego can get bigger by learning this. It's like, well, I'm so clever and I can defeat people and I know this and I can, express that. And so again, that's not very helpful for accomplishing what that pedagogical tool is designed to accomplish, okay? And that's why if you're studying this in the Tibetan monasteries, from what I hear, if you're getting arrogant, your teacher will cut you down and your classmates will cut you down in very harsh, to the point ways, okay? But to go back to some of the benefits of this way of thinking, is it also helps us learn to express our ideas clearly and to realize that sometimes our ideas don't make sense and other people will explain to us why they don't make sense. And so by this happening enough, we learn to become comfortable with being wrong. Okay? We can learn to realize, oh yes, lots of times I say things and then somebody else refutes them, but that doesn't mean I'm stupid. It doesn't mean I'm a bad person. It doesn't mean that other person doesn't like me anymore. It doesn't mean all the other stuff that we impute, that the significance of someone disagreeing with our idea. We realize that all that stuff we impute on that is junk, And so we learn to become okay with people disagreeing with our idea or people refuting our idea, because our motivation is changing, and our motivation is no longer to look good by being right and by being smart, but our motivation becomes to learn. And so when other people refute our ideas and explain to us why our argument is incorrect, we're very appreciative because that's the way we can learn. So it really helps us with all that, if we're practicing properly, with all that ego defensiveness of, I've got to be right, and you can't think I'm stupid because I said the wrong thing, because I'm not stupid, and I won't let you think I'm stupid. Even though inside I feel so stupid. Oh, I'm so stupid. They're so much smarter than me. You drop all that stuff, yeah? Because you just, your motivation changes, and, and you're happy to learn. Yeah? And when you think of how much time and energy we spend worrying about what other people think about us, we would have so much more time and so much more energy if we didn't waste it on that. Don't you agree? Yeah? Okay, so very helpful in that way. It also helps us learn to be more confident in stating our arguments. Yeah, because when you're doing this kind of study, you have to participate. You can't sit on the sidelines, okay? If you have a class where everybody, or you're learning debate or this kind of thing, everybody has to participate. So that way, you gain confidence in learning to express yourself. And again, that's very helpful confidence to learn. And I think especially for women to learn that, because that confidence will carry over into other aspects of our life, because what we're hearing a lot now in the women's movement and in the Me Too movement is how women are not allowed to express themselves in the same way men are. Yeah, well, if you develop this kind of confidence in learning to think clearly and say things clearly, then when you go into that kind of situation, you can hold your own and you aren't intimidated because you have that confidence that knows that you can express yourself well. Yeah, and you're also not so ego-sensitive to what other people think of you or how you look, okay? So all of that very helpful, I think, in character building. And then, of course, the whole purpose of the debating and the philosophy is to get us to realize emptiness and dependent arising. And that, those realizations are the big character builders. Okay, because when we can realize emptiness and dependent arising, the afflictions just really, they get overcome and, overpowered and obliterated. Yeah, and so that really builds our character as well. Yeah, so that's, I thought I should explain that, Otherwise we think character building is just reflecting on our emotions and our childhood and conditioning from childhood. And then sometimes, which is very good and effective, but sometimes we even get into ruminating on that, don't we? Yeah. So, it's good to try and figure out how we're conditioned and what our mind is thinking. But then sometimes if we start just going over that again and again and ruminating, it's not helpful, okay? So, character building is something quite broad. It's quite broad. It's really developing many, many different aspects of ourselves, okay?